Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Dev Diary. Now, I'm pretty excited to get to today's project, so before we get into why, remember to leave a like if you enjoy the video and subscribe if you're new to the channel. Remember to also turn on notifications so you don't miss future videos. So recently, I've been getting into a game called Balatro. Balatro is a score attack game that tasks the player with earning points using poker hands. The target score grows with each round, and so the player must rely on jokers and other means to reach said targets. Now, jokers in particular alter the game in ways from simple score modification to straight up changing gameplay rules. It's a tough game to describe in just a few sentences, but it's a really fun roguelike experience that really tests the player's ability to constantly pivot. However, as much as I enjoy the game, and despite what a lot of Balatro players may say, the game is to a certain extent luck-based, especially on harder difficulties. I'll be the first to tell you I'm not exactly good at the game, but sometimes the game totally feels like a gamble. Now, I bring this all up because the goal of today's project was to take some of those ideas presented in Balatro and try to apply them to another game that would truly make this experience an actual gamble. So I tried to make a version of Balatro that replaces poker hands with a Pachinko/Plinko board. And before we get into the details, just note that this was a proof of concept, and a lot of these ideas are just trying to see what works and what needs work. Also, things like ball count and money are cosmetic for now because they were not the main focus. Anyway, the player can spawn a ball anywhere on the top of the board with left click. And much like Pachinko/Plinko, that ball will travel down the peg-riddled board, scoring points for each peg bonked along the way. Now, each ball keeps track of its own points, and when reaching the bottom, it will fall into one of the many buckets, which all do different things. Now, these buckets are basically our jokers. Now, the effects are pretty standard. Some will add points to a ball's overall points, some will multiply them, some buckets will multiply the player's current overall score, and a couple others will simply give the player money, which again for now is not used, but theoretically money would be used to buy new buckets and the like. Finally, we have two less standard buckets. The first will increase the worth of pegs, meaning balls gain more points per peg bonked. And the second, in the spirit of Pachinko, there is a free ball bucket that will automatically spawn another ball at a random position at the top of the board. And accompanying these bucket effects are some visual aids for the fun of it. They include a burst of stars in the background, and we also see a return of that Thanos snap effect that we figured out not too long ago. And speaking of effects, did you know you can have an effect on the future of this channel by supporting me on Patreon? Not only does it help me keep making these videos, but you can also get access to Patreon exclusive content, downloads, and even early access to the weekly videos. Now, I know it doesn't seem like much, but it actually took me a lot of time to get this far. And a lot of that time was spent tweaking the ball physics, which use gamemaker's physics system. In fact, using a physics system has come with a few of its own issues. For example, it's possible to drop a ball onto a peg on just the right pixel that it'll get stuck. And if the player drops too many balls at a time, they can get wedged in the pegs. So in order to make sure that this couldn't happen, a system was needed. First, you won't be able to tell, but the pegs are constantly vibrating. And we're talking fractions of a pixel here. Now, this normally wouldn't do much for your typical pixel game, but with the physics system, this is just enough to make sure that a ball is never able to remain on a peg forever. But should that somehow fail, if a ball has lost its momentum, it too begins to vibrate like the peg. And if that still doesn't work, especially when two balls get lodged between pegs, well, they're given a small push upwards to hopefully dislodge themselves from their positions. And so these three checks mean that there should be no way for a ball to ever truly get stuck on or near any pegs, which is nice because our boards are meant to be dynamic. Indeed, the way that they're set up is to not only accommodate for size, but hopefully shape as well. The HUD elements are also based on these dynamics, though again, they're not final. And speaking of which, the HUD itself was another headache, but was very necessary to the experience, because like in Balatro, our buckets can be sorted in any order. This is done by clicking the corresponding arrows to the right of each entry. And currently the buckets do not synergize, so bucket order is really more in line with player preference than anything. And so now, while I'm very excited that this project did not end up in absolute failure, you've maybe been able to already pick up on a lot of stuff that needs work. Obviously, more bucket effects are needed, which as someone who is not necessarily good at strategy games, this will be a challenge. And even so, the bucket system has a lot of other issues as well. For example, there's nothing really stopping the player from simply loading the edges up with good buckets and exploiting the positions for easy money or points, though some of this can be balanced by simply making those buckets rarer. The other glaring issue right now is obviously synergy. Synergy is a very important aspect of Balatro, and our current version provides none of that. Although to be fair, the act of deck building and dropping balls are very different beasts. So at some point we need to recognize that this is no longer a Balatro equivalent, and simply a project that was inspired by it. And this is the headspace I'm currently in now, to move this from a Balatro-like into its own thing, because a Pachinko roguelike actually sounds kinda fun. And if I'm being honest, this seems like a pretty solid base to build from. And I mean, heck, since working on this initial version, I've already got even more ideas to add for a next time, though it's hard to tell if they're good ones. So in other words, I'm really excited to keep working on this one, I just don't know if I'm smart enough to pull it off. So what do you think? Is a Pachinko roguelike something that you would enjoy playing? Do you think this bucket system works as is? And heck, would synergy even work in this context? Let me know, leave your thoughts and ideas in the comments. With that said, brings us to the end of today's Dev Diary, so thank you so much for watching, and I will see you next time.